Hello, everybody. You're reading with Jimmy. This is Jimmy. Today we're going to be reading Mythology from Ovid's Metamorphoses, translated by Ian Johnston. We're going to be reading the myth of none other than Hercules. By the gods. Let's get started. This introduction with the brackets is the introduction of what Ovid talks about in Book 9 of Metamorphoses. So you can pause and read this if you'd like to. But let's get right into the story of Hercules. Then warrior Theseus, Neptune's grandson, asked Hercules why he had heaved a sigh and how his forehead had become so marred. There's a little footnote here. You can read this. Theseus' father, Aegeus, was the son of Neptune. So they say Theseus, Neptune's grandson. Neptune was the god of the sea. So Hercules is a Greek river god who was chief of all river gods. Gods are important in mythology. Pay attention, right? So Theseus, the grandson, is asking Hercules why his forehead was so marred. And the Caledonian river god, with wreaths around his tangled hair, replied. So in this version, when we're going to be reading about Hercules, we're going to be reading about Hercules talking about his battle with Hercules, and then we'll continue from there. So Ovid has a different way of talking about the myths, and we're going to bring out all the things that Hercules did through this dialogue. Quote, "Your question is a painful one to me." We'll find out why. "For who wishes to remember battles where he was beaten? But I will tell you how that came about, since the honor of having fought outweighs the shame of being defeated. Besides, I get solace knowing that the winner was such a famous man." And who's that? That's Hercules. Hercules beat him. So we already know the outcome of the fight. But the story bears witness to what Hercules was, and talks about it. So perhaps your ears have heard of Urania. Urania is the Caledonian princess in Greek mythology whose name translates as man-destroyer. And she was the wife of Hercules, his unwitting murderer, killing him with the poisoned shirt of Nessus. We're going to read about that later on. But this is Hercules' wife, who once was a very lovely girl, the jealous hope of many suitors. I was among them. And there's another footnote, and they tell you she's the daughter of Oeneus and the sister of Meleager. Ready? Okay. "When we suitors went to her father's house, the man that I wanted as a father-in-law, I said, 'Oeneus, son of Parthia, take me as a son-in-law.' Hercules, from Alcestis' line, spoke up as I did. And then the other suitors, they backed away, and leaving just us two. Hercules said that he could offer his bride Jupiter as a father-in-law. He was the son of Jupiter or Zeus, depending on if you read Roman or Greek mythology. Ovid was Roman, so he calls Zeus Jupiter. I know it sounds confusing, but stick with me. So Hercules is basically saying he could offer his bride, which is they're both courting the Urania, Jupiter as a father-in-law. That was his father of a mortal mother. And he spoke about his celebrated labors, the labors of Hercules, which we're going to learn about in this myth. The orders that he had succeeded in carrying out for his stepmother, Juno. So Juno was the wife of, yes, Jupiter. Juno, Jupiter, or Zeus, Hera, H-E-R-A. Pay attention. So Juno hated Hercules. Hated him. Why? Well, because her husband had gone down to earth with a mortal woman, and she bore Hercules. She gave birth to Hercules. Gods and human beings fooled around a lot in those days. So in reply, who's I? I, right? Hercules, right? Hercules, right? He says, I spoke against him. Who's him? Hercules. I said, it's a disgraceful if a god yields to a mortal. Uh-oh. He's saying it is disgraceful if a god yields to a mortal. So he's casting aspersions on Hercules' father, who is Jupiter. Back then, Hercules had not yet been made divine. So there's another foreshadowing that's called foreshadowing. Let me write that down. Foreshadowing. Hold on. Let me write it down. Foreshadowing. Okay. Foreshadowing means the narrator is giving us a look ahead. Now, who's narrating this? It's the third person. Let's not forget that. Third person, anonymous narrator. Okay? So he's telling us the dialogue between these two people, right? And this is foreshadowing. Hercules had not yet been made divine. So we know Hercules is going to be made divine at some point in his life. In me, you see the ruler of those rivers. Who's talking now, right? Right? Who's talking? Go back to the beginning here, and it's Hercules. Hercules, right? However you would like to pronounce that. He says, in me, you see the ruler of rivers, whose winding waters flow throughout your realm. I will not be a son-in-law sent here, a stranger from a foreign land, but I'll be part of your own kingdom, one of your own people. Do not let it harm my case that Juno, that's Jupiter's wife, queen of heaven, feels no hatred for me, because she does hate Hercules, and that all the punishments that she ordered in those labors that Hercules was talking about were not imposed on me. As for you, Hercules, so we'll stop there. He's got a little footnote here. Juno had an ongoing hatred for Hercules, since he was the bastard son of Jupiter, and she was the source of the events which led to all the labors of Hercules. He had tremendous labors, given assignments because of Juno. And read number 2. Hercules is the mortal son of Zeus, and after his death he became a god on Olympus. That's the foreshadowing. Okay? So these little footnotes by the translator help us understand the myth. As for you, Hercules, Alchemy's son, you boast. Who's that? That was the wife of Amitron, who she bore 2 children. So as for you, Alchemy's son, she bore 2 children, Hippolytus and Lammon, and she is best known for being the mother of Hercules, whose father was the god Zeus. So this is the woman that Zeus, or Jupiter, seduced. Follow? So as for you, Hercules, you boast that Jupiter is your father. Well, if so, then either that is just not true, or he's guilty of a crime. Your claim that he is your father must involve adultery by your own mother. So choose. Which story do you prefer? Jupiter is your fictitious father? Or that your birth springs from a shameful act? And when I spoke these words, his scowling eyes kept glowering on me. He could not act like a courageous man and just keep his burning rage in check. The words that he spoke in his reply were very few. He said, this is Hercules talking, quote, my hand is stronger than my tongue, and you may win out in an argument so long as I beat you in fighting. And then that violent man attacked me. Okay, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. I was too ashamed to yield, after that grand speech I just delivered. And so I threw the green clothes off my body, held up my arms to fend him off, and my hands curved in against my chest, prepared to fight. And I braced my legs to counter his assault. Scooping some dust up from his hollow palm, he threw it at me, and he turned yellow from contact with the golden sand. And then he grabbed me by the neck, and then by the legs, and then by the crotch. Or rather, he seemed to grab me. He's attacking me from every side. My weight was my best defense, and his assault on me had no effect, just like a massive rock is attacked by the full force of a roaring floods, remains in place. The rocks don't move. They're made safe by their own weight, so I was safe by my own weight. We pulled back briefly and then rejoined the fight. They're like bulls going at it, aren't they? We held our ground, determined not to yield, to give up. Our feet were closely entwined, and so I leaned forward, pushing at him with my chest, my fingers locked with his, my forehead pressed against his forehead. You know, I've seen strong bulls go at each other in this way, striving to win a mate, the prize that they're fighting for, the loveliest cow in all the meadow. The cattle herd looks on, trembling, unsure which one will claim the triumph and become the lord of the great kingdom. But our gleaming chests were fused together. And then Hercules tried 3 times, without success, to push me off. But with his 4th attempt, he broke my grip, loosening the arms that I held around him, and he hit me with his fist. Notice the hyphen, the dash. I am resolved at all events to tell the truth. That's a little sidebar, another hyphen. Remember, he's narrating this, right, to Theseus' son, who's asking about how did he get so marred, so deformed. So he's basically doing a little aside here. He says, I'm so resolved at all events to tell the truth. And then he, Hercules, quickly spun me around and draped himself across my back. He was a monstrous weight. Believe me, I'm not trying to win more credit with a made-up story. So he's basically saying, I ain't lying. I felt I was being flattened by a mountain dumped on top of me. Isn't this great language, ladies and gentlemen? Can you imagine being flattened by a mountain, by a weight like that? Though it was difficult, I pushed out my arms, all dripping with sweat. And with a great push, I loosened his firm hold around my chest. I was gasping for breath, but he pressed forward, and he prevented me from getting back my strength. And then he clutched me by the neck. Finally, my knee was forced to touch the ground, and my mouth bit the sand. My strength was not a match for his. So I tried by my magic skills, slipping away from him by altering my shape to a long snake. But then I twisted my body up in supple coils and flicked out my forked tongue with a fearful hissing. And that man from Tyrannus laughed and ridiculed my magic, saying, in my cradle I used to throttle snakes, and Hercules, though you have more strength than other serpents, you're only one. And how much of the Lanara Hydra would you be? So there's a couple of footnotes. We're going to stop for a moment. Number 2, the infant Hercules had strangled 2 snakes in his cradle. This is part of the Hercules myth. Put there by Juno to kill him. So when Hercules was born, Juno put a couple of snakes in his crib, and he killed them both. The Hydra, which we'll find out a little bit later, was a monster with many snake heads. If you cut off one of them, 2 new ones grew up. They just grew. So if you cut a head off, you get 2. Cut another head off, you get 2, and it kept multiplying. So Hercules destroyed that Hydra by burning the neck where he had cut off the head and preventing the growth of replacements. This event was one of his 12 labors, which you'll find out. So now, since, right, Achilles, whatever you want to say, Hercules turned himself into a snake, Hercules says, I've strangled better than you. And how much of the Lenora Hydra would you be? If wounded, the Hydra reproduced, and cutting off one of its 100 heads was dangerous because it grew 2 more. So to replace what it had lost, thus making its neck more vicious than before. But still, those serpents grew like branches from its wounds, and harming it made the monster larger. I beat the Hydra, and once it was down, I slaughtered it. So what do you imagine lies in store for you now that you've changed yourself into a mere image of a snake, using weapons which are unfamiliar to you, and hiding in a borrowed shape? He spoke, and then his fingers seized the top part of my neck. I gagged, as if my throat was being throttled in a vice, and I struggled to pry his thumbs from my windpipe. He was beating me in my serpent shape as well. But I still had my third form, that of a ferocious bull. Changing my body to that shape, I fought on. I was attacking from the left, and he wrapped his arms around my brawny neck, and as I moved off, he followed me, twisting and pulling at my horns. Remember, he's a bull now, right? Until he drove them down into the ground and forced me to fall over in a deep sand. But he didn't stop there. Seizing my tough horn in his merciless fist, he snapped it off, and he ripped it from my mutilated head. But the Nazas filled up this horn with fruit and sweet flowers and consecrated it. And so now the noble goddess of abundance is rich indeed, thanks to that horn of mine. So what are the Naiads? They're the nymphs presiding over the fountains, wells. And don't forget, this is the god of the river, right? That he's fighting, right? Achilles is the god of the river. So he's surrounded by nymphs. So when he snaps off his horns, these nymphs fill it with fruit and sweet flowers, and they consecrated it. They make it a divine object. Right? Achilles spoke. One of his attendants, a nymph dressed like Diana with her hair streaming across both shoulders, came in, carrying all of autumn's harvest crops into the overflowing horn with tasty fruit to offer a second course. Who's Diana? She's an ancient Roman goddess of the hunt. The Roman equivalent of the goddess Artemis. So remember, we have Roman gods and Greek equivalents. Well, Greek started it, and then the Romans just renamed the gods. Daylight comes. As the first rays of sunlight strike the hills, the young men depart. They will not wait there until the stream is serene and peaceful and all the flooding waters have calmed down. Who's saying this? The third-person anonymous narrator. Deep down in the middle of his waters, Achilles hides his rustic features. Remember, he's the river god, right? And since he's the river god, and when Hercules and he were doing battle, the river was in turmoil, right? You got it? Are you using your imaginations, ladies and gentlemen? And Achilles' damaged head with one horn missing, losing that single horn taken from him by Hercules, is his only reason for feeling sad. In all other matters, he's unhurt. See how the narrator talks about, right, Achilles? In all other matters, Achilles is unhurt, and he conceals his loss with reeds and willow leaves around his head. And if you remember, that's what we saw when we were introduced to him at the beginning. But you, fierce Nessus, were fatally hurt. Now there's a shift here, right? There's a little shift right here. in the narration. He's going on to another story about Hercules, which he tells you here, Hercules and Nessus. Who's Nessus? This is a centaur in Greek mythology who was killed by Hercules, I'm giving you a hint, after he attempted to assault his wife, Deramina. But you, says the narrator of Fierce Nessus, you were fatally hurt by passion for that same young virgin girl. Remember, we were talking about the river god, right? Hercules and Hercules were bidding for who became Darina, Hercules' wife, right? They were both suitors, right? You got that? Nessus was also, he had a passion for her. A flying arrow struck you in the back. If you look at the footnote down here, let's read the footnote. Nessus was a centaur, right? Hercules was originally called son of Hercules. Okay. A lot of times they don't use their names in mythology stories. They do son of so-and-so. Like when you saw when we started, Theseus, grandson of Neptune. So if they didn't want to use the word Theseus later on in the myth, they would just say the grandson of Neptune, and you'd all know it was Theseus. Remember, no television here, ladies and gentlemen, no radio, no iPhones. This is just verbal. This is just, and that's why you see these marvelous descriptions by Ovid of what's going on, so you can use your imagination, which is the greatest director-producer in the world. Got it? So, struck you in the back. For Hercules, son of Jupiter, while returning to his native city with Darina, his new wife, so he's married now, he reaches a stream in the river Aeneas. Swollen by winter rains, the water flow was now above its customary height, with many whirlpools, and it could not be crossed. And even though Hercules had no fear for himself, he did have some concern for his bride. And then Nessus rode up. His limbs were powerful, and he was well acquainted with the ford. He said to Hercules, "Child of Hercules," in other words, Hercules, "with my help, she will be deposited on the bank over there. You should use your strength for swimming." The hero of Boeotia, that's Hercules, hands the Caledonian girl to Nessus. Notice this is the narrator right here, talking, right? He's talking here, narrator. The hero of Boeotia hands the Caledonian girl to Nessus. He's describing what happened. He doesn't say Hercules gave, he just calls him the hero of Boeotia. She is pale with fear of both the river and the centaur. She doesn't want to go with this centaur. Hercules throws his club and curved bow across to the far bank. Wow. Then, just as he is, and weighed down by a quiver and the lion skin, he says, "Since I have started, I must cross the river." He doesn't pause or search out for the calmest stretch of water, for he refuses to be borne across because the stream has given its consent. Hercules doesn't bow to anybody, including water. And as he climbs the further bank, which means he got across, and grabs the bow he hurled across, he suddenly hears his wife cry out. Sensing that Nessus is now intending to violate Hercules' trust, he shouts at Nessus, "Where are you carrying her, you brute beast, vainly relying on your rapid hooves? I'm talking to you, Nessus, you monster with a double form. Listen to me. Do not run off with what's rightly mine. If respect for me doesn't restrain you, the wheel your father rides might well prevent forbidden sexual acts. You won't escape, though you may trust your powers as a horse. I'll catch you with the arrow, not my feet." Let's read the footnote. The father of Nessus attempted to rape Juno Don't forget who Juno is. She's the wife of Zeus, or Jupiter, who hates Hercules. But Ixion was punished by eternally tied to a wheel deep in Hades. So he's saying, if respect for me, Hercules, doesn't restrain you, that wheel your father, that's Nessus' father, rides might well prevent forbidden sexual acts. And then he, Hercules, carried out what he had said. He shot an arrow at the fleeing back, and the iron barb struck Nessus through the chest. And when he removed the arrow, blood poured out, mixed with lethal poison of the Hydra from his wounds, one where the arrow hit and one where it was sticking out. And there's another footnote here. Pay attention. Hercules put poisonous blood from the Hydra on the tips of his arrows. Remember when he killed the Hydra, right? So he poisons his arrows and shoots the centaur with a poisoned arrow. Nessus sopped up his blood and muttered to himself, I will not die without getting revenge. And so he soaked his shirt in his warm blood, and he gave it to the girl that he was abducting, telling Dorina, it was a gift which has the power to arouse new love. Then there's a break in the narration, right? Okay. Many years go by, and the entire world is full of deeds of mighty Hercules and his stepmother's hatred towards him. Who's talking here? The narrator. Hercules has captured Oechalia and is preparing to make sacrifice to Jupiter at Canaan. And then chattering Rumor, who takes great delight in mixing false things with truth and grows, thanks to her lies, from the minutest things, flies on ahead of him and strikes your ears, Dorina, claiming Hercules, your husband, is in love with Iole. And there's a footnote. So Rumor was a let's say, a mythological character, and gets into Dorina's head, saying that Hercules is in love with another woman, Iole, and that's what the footnote should tell us. Was impregnated. After marriage, she gave birth to twins. Iole was the daughter of Eurydice. Okay, so Rumor is whispering into his wife, Hercules' wife, Dorina, that he loves Iole. Dorina, who loves Hercules, believes that story of this new affair and is alarmed. First, she weeps, turns to weeping, and feeling miserable, she vents her sorrow with laments. But soon she says, why am I crying? My rival will be happy with these tears. Since she is coming here, I must prepare some brand new scheme while it's still possible, before that other woman takes control inside my marriage bed. Should I complain or hold my tongue? Go back to Calydon or remain right here? Should I leave this house? Or if I can do nothing more, should I at least make things more difficult for them? Oh, Meleager was the hero in his temple. He was already famed for another hero. What if I remember that I am your sister, and with a brave heart prepared to carry out a crime and show by slitting Iole's throat how much more harm a woman's grief is able to inflict? This is a very interesting statement by her, isn't it? What should I do? My husband is cheating on me, she thinks. Narrator. Her mind reviewed the different options, and of them, all she chose to send the shirt soaked with Nessus' blood to restore the strength of her husband's fading love. Unaware that the shirt would make her miserable, notice this, why would it make her miserable? Don't forget, it's soaked in the Hydra's blood, right? She gave it to the unsuspecting Lycus. Who's that? That's one of Hercules's, right? Is one of Hercules's attendants, Lycus, using words designed to win him over. The desperate, unhappy woman told him to give this to her husband. Hercules, knowing nothing about the shirt. See, the narrator makes it clear Hercules doesn't know, right? He doesn't know. She doesn't even know what she did, right? She doesn't know that this shirt is poison. Takes it and drapes across his shoulders the poison from the Lernaean Hydra. At the time, Hercules is setting incense, offering prayers by the initial flames, and pouring wine from a dish onto the marble altars. The destructive power in that poison, heated by the flames, softens and dissolves and spreads itself through Hercules' body. But while he still can, he silences his groans with his habitual courage. Right? But later, once his agony has overpowered his resistance, he throws the altars down and fills the woods of Ovid with his cries. He wastes no time in trying to rid himself of that fatal shirt. But wherever he tears it, it rips away the skin. The details are appalling to describe. And it sticks to his flesh, so that all attempts to get it off are futile. Or else it shows itself as mutilated limbs and massive bones. His very blood sizzles, boiling from the searing venom, just like red-hot metal plunged into freezing water. His pain goes on and on. Voracious flames suck in his stomach. From his whole body, black sweat keeps oozing out. Scorched sinews crack, and hidden poison liquefies his bones. Oh my God. Raising his hands, he shouts to the stars, "Daughters of Saturn, feed on my collapse. Eat your fill, you cruel goddess. Look down from your lofty heaven on this destruction and glut your savage heart. Or if my state earns pity, even from an enemy, even from you, then carry off my soul, my wretched spirit racked with searing pain, and boil and born for toil. To me, death is a gift, a fitting present from my stepmother. Was it for this that I threw down Berosus, who desecrated shrines with strangers' blood?" This is the Egyptian king who was killed by Hercules. We're going to go into now the labors that he went. And he's crying out to the gods, was it for this horrible ending of his life, that he killed this Berosus? Was it for this? Notice, was it for this? Was it for this? When he says, was it for this? And you can stop me here and read some of these notes that I gave you. These are all the labors that he did throughout his life. This is how Ovid deals without narrating the labors, which everybody knows from other tales of mythology and so on and so forth. People were very familiar with the labors of Hercules. But now, in the Metamorphosis we're reading, the third-person narrator recounts these in Hercules' speech. So these are stories inside a story. Was it for this I raised Antaeus up above his mother earth, who gave him strength, or stood my ground before the triple shape of that Iberian herdsman Graon? So Antaeus was a guy, you can read about him, that I put a note here. He drew his strength from the earth. So whenever he was standing there, he was a giant, he drew strength. So what Hercules did is he lifted him off the earth and strangled him. You can read that note up here. Or Graon. Or Cerberus, with your 3 heads. Cerberus was the monstrous 3-headed dog that guarded the gates of the underworld, and Hercules took care of him too. Was it for this these hands of mine hauled down the horns of that Cretan bull? So the Cretan bull was a divine bull, and you can read that note here. And worked at Elis and the Cynthian lake in the Parthian woods. Okay, Elis performed the fifth labor by cleaning the stables of King Aegeus of Elis. This is a great story where the stables, oh man, can you imagine all these horses and the poop that they gathered? And Hercules cleaned those stables by redirecting 2 rivers. That's how strong this guy was. Right? Thanks to their strength, I did not fetch that belt engraved with gold back from the Amazons and those apples guarded by the dragon who never sleeps. And were the centaurs able to stand up to me, or that boar which wreaked such havoc in Arcadia? And was the hydra helped by growing larger from its loss, gaining redoubled strength? Remember, he killed all these things, these creatures. And what about the time I saw the Thracian horses fed human blood, their stables cramped and mangled bodies. And once I seen that, overpowered them and killed those horses. Pardon me, and their master. The huge Numian lion now lies dead, killed by these arms of mine. And with his neck I have held up heaven. Jupiter's cruel wife, Juno, may have grown tired of issuing orders? Is that why you did this? I'm still not tired of carrying them out. But now I'm facing some new disease with courage, weapons, and power in war cannot resist. An all-consuming fire roams deep inside my lungs and feeds itself on every limb. And yet, Eurysteus is thriving, and there are men who still believe that gods exist. So I'm going to pause here. I'm not going to pause here, but you can pause me. And this big footnote talks about the labors of Hercules, which I also gave you notes of on the side. These are unbelievable feats of strength. We're dealing with a strong man here, ladies and gentlemen, in this myth. Okay? Got it? Okay. So when Hercules had spoken, he wandered across the heights of Ota, still ravaged by the poison, and like a bull with a hunting spear stuck in its body, after the man who threw it goes away. You could have seen him there, often groaning and grinding his teeth, often attempting again and again to rip off his back the remnants of that shirt. He was flattening trees, howling at mountains, raising his arms up to his father's sky. Can you imagine the suffering of this guy? And then lo and behold, he caught sight of Lycus, hidden away in the cavernous rock and terrified. In his pain, Hercules brought all his rage to bear on Lycus, and he yelled at him, "Lycus! Weren't you the man who brought that fatal gift and gave it to me? And are you not the one responsible for my death?" Lycus trembled, grew pale, and panicked. Timidly he mentioned his excuses, but while he was pleading and trying to reach for Hercules' knee, Hercules grabbed him, spun him around 3 or 4 times, and then threw him with more force than a catapult out over the depths of the sea. And as he soared upward into the airy breeze, Lycus hardened, just as rain, so people say, is frozen by icy winds. That's how snow is formed. And in the whirling snow, soft bodies are packed down and rounded into dense clouds of hailstones. By the way, that's how snow does happen, right? At freezing rain. So Lycus hardened as he threw him across the sea. In the same way, so former ages claim, once those powerful arms threw him up into the air, fear drained the man of blood, and lacking any moisture in his body, he was transformed to solid rock. And now, who's saying all this? The narrator. In the waters off Euboea, there stands a little reef which juts up from the deep and keeps the traces of human form. Sailors are afraid to walk on that rock, as if the stone might sense their presence there. They call it Lycus. And then the famous son of Jupiter, you cut down trees that grew on rugged Ota, built up a funeral pyre. And he told Philoctetes, son of Paeus, to take charge of your bow, your bulky quiver, and your arrows, destined to see once more the realm of Troy. There's a footnote here. Troy is that city could only be captured with the bow and arrow of Hercules, who had been to Troy before when he attacked King Laomedon for his failure to keep a promise. So years later, Philoctetes, now the possessor of the bow, went to Troy to help end the Trojan War. You see how things come together? And with that same man's help, you lit the flame deep in the pry. Who? You, Hercules. While the pry was catching fire in the ravenous flames, you spread the hide of the Numidian lion, which you were wearing, on the top part of the wood and lay down, neck resting on your club, looking just like a guest with garlands on his head, reclining in the middle of full cups of wine. By now, the growing flames were crackling and had spread in all directions. They attacked his limbs, but his body was serene and scorned them. The gods grew anxious for this protector of the earth, so Jupiter, his father, Saturn's son, sensing their mood, spoke reassuring words. Quote, "You gods above, your fear gives me great joy, and I can freely and wholeheartedly congratulate myself for being called ruler and father of grateful people, and also for the way your high regard protects my offspring. For though your concern pays tribute to what this great man has done, I am obliged that you honor him. But do not let an empty fear affect your hearts. Think nothing of those fires on Oda. He who has overcome all things will overcome those flames you now perceive, and you will have no sense of Vulcan's power other than in parts that his mother gave him." What does that mean? Footnote? Let's run down there. Vulcan was the god of fire. "What he gets from me is everlasting beyond death's reach. It will not be destroyed or consumed in any fire. And once that part is done with earth," that's the part, right, of his mortal side, "and I have faith that all you gods will find this act of mine a reason to rejoice. But if perhaps some god, and I mean any god, will grieve when Hercules becomes divine and is not happy to bestow this gift of divinity, then that god should realize that we're giving it because Hercules' merit makes him worthy of it, and should approve, although unwillingly." Who do you think he's talking about? His wife. The gods agreed, even royal Juno, Jupiter's wife, who, if she looked upset with his last words, appearing to resent that he was making reference to her, seemed to accept the rest of what he said. Meanwhile, whatever the fire could burn up, Vulcan had consumed, and what now remained, no one would recognize as Hercules. For he bore no traces of those features that he had inherited from his mother, but he preserved only those he had received from Jupiter. That's important, right? The flames took his human form. And just as a serpent throws off old age when it casts off his skin, you know snakes shed their skin, don't you? And takes great delight in being renewed with glistening fresh scales. In the same way, when that Tirathian hero, Hercules, had lost his mortal limbs, his better part grew strong. And he began, let's finish this. I didn't want to give you the whole next page because it stops here. His better part grew strong, and he began to look much greater than before. He was awe-inspiring, with solemn dignity. The omnipotent Father, the Father who knows all things, carried him through the hollow clouds in his 4-horse chariot and placed him among the glittering stars. Atlas, who holds up the world, felt his weight. There's a footnote here, right? As well as becoming a god on Olympus, Hercules also became a constellation, which you can see in the night sky if you know where to look. You should Google that. Since Hercules was now part of the sky, his weight was added to the burden that Atlas had to hold up in order to keep heaven and earth apart. We'll probably read the story of Atlas, or at least look at it a little bit. Whew. You've been reading Mythology with Jimmy. This was the story, as told by Ovid, of Hercules. Please learn more about mythology by watching our ongoing videos on mythology. And be sure to read my analysis of Hercules, as well as visit and read other classics with me on this website. This website is hundreds of hours of wonderful readings, translated and original, right, on YouTube channel as well. So we so enjoy having you here. And remember, any questions? Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com, Jimmy at readingwithjimmy.com. I hope you enjoyed the story of one strong son of a gun. Thank you for being here.